2 weeks ago, I attempted to preach a 4-part series. It was like a 4-part preach, 4 points. And it was the first time it ever happened to me. I didn't get through my notes. And so instead of getting 4 points out, I got 2 points, 1 and 2. And so last week I came thinking, okay, well, I haven't finished it, so let me do 3 and 4. And then I started with a recap, just for those that weren't here like the previous week, and I only did 1. And so I went backwards. And so I'm gonna try not to do too much of a recap this morning, and I'm really gonna aim to do point number 3. I'm not even gonna aim for 4. I'm just gonna do 3. So we are working through the series called To Be Sure. The preach that was started 2 weeks ago, I called A Life That's Out of This World. And the 4 points was Christians are born for glory, they are kept for glory, they are prepared for glory, and they can lay hold of that glory now. So that's the framework. It says in 1 Peter 1, Peter, an apostle of Jesus Christ, to God's elect, exiles scattered throughout the provinces of Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who have been chosen according to the foreknowledge of God the Father, to the sanctifying work of the Spirit, to be obedient to Jesus Christ and sprinkled with His blood. Grace and peace be yours in abundance. Praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In His great mercy, He has given us new birth. Say new birth. New birth. Into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. I mean, that should just settle us. You take the truth of what that passage is putting out to us, and the truth that God is giving us, that actually needs to reside here in our hearts and in our minds, and we start to realize, my goodness, is that true? Yes, it is. I am settled in this truth. If you can settle that, what we've just read now, and it became something that you knew, you would live differently. If you don't have it, well then, you're kind of just moving and shaking as far as your circumstances go and how you're kind of feeling in the moment. But these are truths that God gives us so that we can live with an assurance, so that we can be sure. And when you live with an assurance and you live with that confidence, you live differently to the world. I mean, this is talking about the fact that we've been chosen by the Father, we've been purchased by the Son, and we've been set apart by the Spirit. There's a Trinitarian work that's happening here. The Father initiates a redemptive plan. The Son achieves it. He earns it on our behalf. And then the Holy Spirit appropriates that to our lives. And the reason why God does that is when He saves us, He is saving us with something in mind. There's an outcome in mind. He doesn't save us to then, okay, well, now that you're saved, it's up to you. Good luck with this. Good luck with the Christian walk. And if you do it well then, we'll applaud you at the end. That's not what God is saying here. What He's saying is, I have saved you in a way where there is a living hope that flows from it. You are now born into, because you've been born of God. This is not just Christianity in a nominal sense. This is not just a label, like I profess to be a Christian. This is when you come to faith in a way where the Spirit of God has done a work in your heart and has changed you from the inside out, and you are radically changed forever. When that happens, you are born into this living hope, and it's alive because your hope is Jesus, and He is alive today. There is resurrection power in this living hope, and we have this living hope that is true for us, and it's true for our futures, because we're not just born into this living hope. We are born into an inheritance that can never perish or fade or be spoiled. I mean, that's like, if you think of what this world has to offer, everything can be corrupted and can rust and has warranties and expiration dates. Nothing that this world offers you will last forever. Everything that God offers us will last forever. And so we're born into this living hope, and we are born into this inheritance. And so we're born for that glory. And so this is part of what the series is trying to convey, is that when that happens, when you are born into this living hope, that is true for you for the rest of your life. So Jesus gives us eternal life. That's the promise of God. When we believe Him, there is a commitment from the Father to say, I've redeemed you, I've saved you, but it's not just my power that will save you, as in like move you from a kingdom of darkness into my kingdom of light, but there's a keeping power. I will keep you. And so that's the truth of what God's saying, and whether we believe it or not, it's true. Whether we live by it or not, it's true. When you live by it, you live with that assurance. When you don't live by that, even though you've been saved in that way, you just live a Christian life, but you don't have a certainty. You don't have an assurance. You're not confident. Your life is kind of moved by whatever your circumstances are throwing at you. I mean, Peter's talking about amazing language here of like rejoicing despite your troubles. Like, you can only do that when you have a certainty of what God's done for you. But when you're swaying from one thing to the next, and your joy is based on your circumstances, well then, you're not going to be certain of where you stand. You're not going to be certain of your future. What happens to you is what dictates how you live your life. And so to have an assurance, to know, I mean, this is God's heart for us. His desire. In 1 John, he writes, I write these things to you, speaking about the gospel and the truth of what God has done and what it means for us. I write these things to you who believe in the name of the Son of God, so that you may know. What? That you have eternal life. It's God's desire. He wants us to live in this way where we actually know it. And then it goes on in verse 4. This inheritance is kept in heaven for you. So your inheritance is in safekeeping. It's reserved for you. What is this inheritance? Well, we're co-heirs with Christ. We will get resurrected bodies, and we'll have reward for how we have lived out this salvation that has been given us. So salvation is something that we receive, but then in Philippians it talks about that we must work out that salvation, and we've got good works that God has prepared for us, not to achieve any form of merit in His eyes, not to win His favor. That's been done by Jesus. But rewards flows from that, and the Bible is full of that language of crowns and rewards and inheritance. So whatever that is, as simple as a cup of water, Jesus said, He sees it. And you know, it's like we take a mental note of our failures. He takes a mental note of the good works. We remember our sins. He doesn't. He remembers how we've lived our lives in a way where the grace that has entered our lives starts to be dispensed in ways where we love others and serve others and proclaim this good news in such a way that His kingdom does advance. And those rewards, those inheritances that God says, it's for you, but I'm keeping it for you. Like that's a safe thing. You know, like we want to know, where do we invest our money? Where's the economy going? What's the currency going to be like? And what are all these changes that's currently happening? What effect is this going to have on my life? Nothing is secure but this. This is kept for you, reserved for you. And then it says, who through faith are shielded by God's power until the coming of the salvation that is ready to be revealed in the last time. Do you realize what God's saying is, what I have in store for you, this eternal celestial future where you will have perfect fellowship with me, there won't be any sin or any evil or anything of what we experience in this life It will be absolute perfection, and we'll be in his presence, and we will have resurrected bodies, and we'll have reward and crowns, and who knows what that is or what it will look like. There's not too much that we get from Scripture for us to know exactly what that is. But I know, whatever life you have on this earth, the best life that you can find, it won't be a comparison. And so God's saying, that life is kept for you. But then he says, who are shielded? So your inheritance is kept for you, but you are kept for it. Do you understand how God's talking about his keeping power? All of what I have in mind for you, the fact that I saved you for a purpose. You're born for glory. That glory is kept for you, and you are kept for it. Good news? I feel like I want to punch an elephant, man. It's like, come on. It doesn't get better than this. What are we living for, man? What is it that gets you up in the morning? It can't be anything else. When I know that I'm so secure in him and he is keeping me for everything that he is keeping for me, it's like, it doesn't get better than this. So we're born for glory, but we're also kept for glory. You know, it's like we look so much at our own lives and our level of faith and how we're running this race. And we put so much emphasis on whether we're doing well or we're not doing well. And then our sense of worth and our sense of security is attached to that. So if we're doing well in the race, then it's like, yay. But I mean, how close are you now straddling to the line of self-righteousness? Because look at me, I'm running this race. And if you feel like I'm not running this race, and I'm not doing well, then you just live with despair. You see, it's like we're putting emphasis on our faithfulness. What we should be doing is putting emphasis on his faithfulness. Because it's his saving power, his keeping power. And when you focus on that, you don't actually worry about how you live your life. There is a natural flow from this position of knowing his saving power and his keeping power. When these truths sink into your heart, you live differently. Then you don't have to be like, oh, how am I living? How am I doing? It's like, no, stop looking at you, look at him. And when you look at him and you see him for all of who he is, his character, his love, his mercy, his compassion, his grace, his steadfastness, his faithfulness in his saving you and in his keeping you, well, that's the difference that it makes. Now we live with that truth, and we live with the fact that we've been born for glory and we are kept for glory. That is good news. Point number 3. We are prepared for glory. I want to ask the question, what is your purpose in life? Do you know God's got a purpose for your life? Like, we need to know what his purpose for our lives is to know what our purpose in life is. Like, either I'm going to be aligning myself to God's will and his plan for me, or I'm going to be living some other purpose. Can I just give you a heads up? This one's for free. It's not to pursue happiness and health and lay hold of prosperity and to enjoy everything that this world has to offer. I mean, that to me is probably a description of how most people live their lives. The world. It's like, how do I find the easiest life and avoid as much difficulty as possible and just soak up everything that this world has potentially to give me? That it will be some form of accumulation and some form of more, and if I have this and I have that and I can live in this way, so it's like I'm just pursuing this thing, and when I get there in this temporal life, then I could say, I've now got it. This is true fulfillment. Really? You just need to do a study of those people that have kind of reached those goals and realize how they're still not fulfilled, which is where, like, people who have wealth, it's never enough. How much is enough? Just that little more. Because it doesn't satisfy. It doesn't bring fulfillment. I just want to say, if that's how, and I mean, you guys need to be honest with yourselves as far as answering that question. But if that is your goal, if that's what you are aiming for, I want to tell you that your ambitions are too small, and your ambitions are too low, and your ambitions are too temporal. There's way more. There is way more. You need to lift your head. You need to see the glory of who God is and what He is busy with, and start to realize there is way more than this little goal that I am chasing after and pursuing and even praying for God's blessing over. It's not what it's about. You are being prepared for glory. Start to think like that. Start to live your life according to that. Then we start to live differently to the world, because the world is doing that. They're living for what this world can give. And it's dog eat dog. Each man for himself. And we're just going to push people aside and try and lay claim to as much as we can. That is not what God has for us. In Colossians 3 it says, since you've been raised with Christ, set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things above, not on earthly things. So what God's purpose for our lives is that we would be conformed in the image of His Son, that we would become more and more like Jesus. And when that happens, we bring Him more glory. We become light in a dark place. And when we become light in a dark place and we bring Him glory, we're also advancing His kingdom. And our lives start to become one of obedience and one of, what's your will, God? And I want to live in accordance with your will. I mean, you just take the opening lines of the Lord's Prayer. That's what it is. Our Father who is in heaven, being conformed in the image of the Son. He's our Father. We are sons and daughters. Progressively, being transformed progressively in the likeness of His Son. Hallowed be your name. We bring you glory. Your kingdom come. Our lives, is it advancing the kingdom? Or are we advancing our own agenda? Your will be done, living a life of obedience, living in accordance with what God has in mind. I mean, Ephesians 2 talks about the fact that He's prepared good works for us in advance. Like before we were born, before we came to faith, He had things in mind for us. He prepared good works. And so we get to live in response to that. And so from a place of obedience and faith and being changed in the likeness of Christ, what happens when all of those things take place is that the reward that God has for us becomes greater. So there's even greater glory. And I mean, we can live our lives in a way where none of that's true. We can be selfish and live for ourselves. And you know what? God's grace is enough for that as well. And so our destination will still be heaven. But how we experience heaven, that's a different story. You know that there's different experiences in heaven? I mean, no one will be jealous because there's no sin. But there's reward. And so when we set our minds and our hearts on things above, and we realize God's purpose for my life is actually to be transformed in the likeness of Jesus and to live a life that is about His glory and about His kingdom advancing and about His will and living in accordance with that will, then we start to actually live the life that He has in mind for us. And with that purpose, greater glory. It's like glory is brewing. Like this, He's laying up for us and it's reserved for us and He's keeping us for it. I don't know if we have enough emphasis on the fact that God wants us to grow and mature and become more like Him. I think we celebrate the fact that we are saved. We celebrate the fact that we've been redeemed. We celebrate the fact that by His grace we get to have this amazing gift given to us. We just receive it. But hey, like, what about the fact that this gift changes who we are? You know, I think we want to live in this life where we actually, because of God's grace, I can live however I want. You know, and we find excuses for our lives, and we put it all under God's grace. No, that's not true. God's heart is that we are transformed. There's a refining, there's a shaping taking place. You know, it's like he saved the Israelites out of Egypt, and He got them out of Egypt, and it took like 40 days. But then He took 40 years to get Egypt out of them. It's like there was two parts to this. And we talk about these stages of our faith, where we come to faith. We are born of God and we come to faith, and that's an event. And then we're growing in God. We are continuing in the faith. That's a process. And then eventually is the crowning of our faith, where we receive this inheritance, where this celestial life of perfection with God for all eternity begins. And that's an eternal state. So there's event, process, eternal state. And we between the two. So for those who are saved, for those who have come to faith, you've been born of God, and you've got this incredible inheritance, this beautiful glory, the crowning of your faith lying ahead, and you in between the two, and you continuing in your faith. There's a process. But the story of the Israelites, I mean, it's there in the Bible to help us understand that deliverance takes place. You are taken out of the kingdom of darkness. And the means is the blood of the Lamb that gets applied to the doorposts of your houses. And if you are under that covering, you are delivered, you are brought out, you go through the waters of baptism, through the Red Sea, and then you're walking in the wilderness up until the point where you enter the promised land. Do you get the image? One of the greatest stories, but it's telling us about the story of the Bible. And so God is morphing and changing and shaping and molding and strengthening us. Why? Because He's preparing us for glory. Jesus wants to present us to the Father as blameless, perfect. And so this perfection, this process of perfection, is unfolding in our lives. And God uses many different ways to do that, through His Word, through His witness in our lives. The Spirit testifies with our spirit. He uses it like through community, like he shapes and molds us. We get to serve one another. We love one another. There's a one anotherness in our togetherness, which changes who we are. Like we are changed in the likeness of Christ because we are in this design that He has. Like that's His plan A. And we're commissioned in that. But you know what? He also uses trials. And He uses the difficulties of this life to shape us and to mold us. It says in verse 6, "In all this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while you may have had to suffer grief in all kinds of trials." You see how Peter talks like, while you're experiencing trials, you can still greatly rejoice. I wonder how true that is of us in our walks with God. Like, do we rejoice when all is well? Or do we also rejoice when we're facing difficulty? When times are tough? When things don't go our way? One of the things that I draw from this is that trials are temporary. It says, for a little while. But now you might be saying, I've been struggling with something for pretty much my entire life. Yeah, I think that's what Peter's talking about. The little while is this in-between stage. It's the wilderness wanderings. It's God taking Egypt out of us. Within the context of eternity, this life is a little while. It's a blimp. He is referring to some specific trials that he knows of that the church there, or the churches are going through. But it's written to them and then given to us for us to realize that when we are facing the things that we are facing, there is something glorious that's unfolding. We're living this life of overlap. We are on the other side of judgment because Jesus faced that judgment for us. And so when our faith is in Jesus, we're on the other side of that judgment. But we're on this side of glory. So this life of overlap that we live out in a fallen world, and Jesus doesn't take us out of the world. It's like not that you take them out of the world, but that they would be transformed within this world, and that they would be a light and they would be salt in this world. But that means we face what this world has to offer. There's a fallenness about this world. This earth is cursed. Yes, God will redeem it. And there are signs of redemption, and people are coming to faith. But there's still a fallen reality to what we face. Then it says, these have come so that the proven genuineness of your faith, of greater worth than gold, which perishes even though refined by fire, may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. You see, what I get from that, when I read that, I see trials are necessary. There's a so that. If we don't have a theology for suffering and difficulty, we're in trouble. Because it shapes how we think about God. And it shapes how we live out our faith. So, I love the fact that Peter addresses this. He addresses it within the glory of the story. Like we're born for glory, we're kept for glory, but we're also prepared for glory. There's that as well. But even through that, you can greatly rejoice. Because of the truth of the fact that you've been born for glory. Because you know what's lying ahead. And that you know that this is a little while. But it's necessary so that... Who wants an artificial faith? Who wants a genuine faith? We put our hand up, but if you had to say the genuine faith comes with difficulty, who wants that? Yeah. Like we all know the answer should be yes. And you know what? If we had the opportunity to get to eternity and look back, we'd be saying, of course. Why would you choose anything else? Do you think Job is in heaven now saying, oh man, I wish I could go back and have everything different. I wish I could have it all changed. No, he's not. So somehow we got to allow the suffering and the difficulty of this world to be a part of God's glorious story. Because if it can't be, then we've got to separate ourselves from it, and we've got to find weird ways of explaining why it's there. God wants to strengthen us. He wants to galvanize us. He wants a proven genuineness of our faith. There's an authenticating process that takes place. Good works have been prepared for you, but you need to be prepared for good works. How do you go from being selfish to selfless? How do you live out this deny yourself? Pick up your cross. You don't automatically just fall into it like you fall into a pothole. That stuff's got to be worked in you. And I tell you, as a father, I get that. I want what's best for my children. And I can tell you now, I don't want them to face hardship. It's the last thing I want. But if I know that hardship is going to develop something in them, and that it will translate to greater humility, greater perseverance, greater gratitude, then should I be bailing them out? Should I be getting, oh, no, don't give them that hardship. When you start thinking about as a father towards a son or towards your children, like you start to realize, no, they need that. I mean, John had an interesting season this year with his rugby. And he was in a team, and he had a comfort in that team. He had mates in the team, and it was like that was the groove that he was in. And then, like, just on the other side of the midway point of the season, he was dropped to the team below. And he was not happy. And part of what made it hard is that no one explained to him why. He was almost like, tell me that I suck. You know, don't not say anything. Drop one team. And then, like, 2 or 3 weeks later, dropped another team. So he's dropped 2 teams. Now he's with people that he doesn't know, and according to them, they don't know how to play rugby. But it's like, now this is what am I going through? I'm going to leave this sport, man. You know, like you get into we've all been there, right? I know there's some of you that's never been dropped from a team, but like when you feel dejected and like no one's explained anything and it's like it doesn't make sense, and you speak to your coach and the coach is like, no, you got to speak to the manager, and the manager is like, no, there was this other thing like that. And people are being put in your position, and as far as you can make out, it's like this is seemingly not a justifiable thing. Like I've been dropped, but surely, and your mates are telling you, you're way better than that guy. Now you're facing it. And the obvious thing is like, I'm done. I think he actually used those words. I'm done. And for myself and Antoinette, we've always kind of said to our kids, you always finish what you started. See it through. Finish the season. Now, I'm in the back of my mind, it's like there's got to be something that can come from this, that will be good. Like I've got to trust that as much as I want to get there and I want to speak to the coaches, and you know, it's like I've got to hold my wife back as well. By soap, Mother Bear. But he sticks it out. He stays the course. And he goes to practice with a good attitude. And he plays the games that he plays that is now with people that he doesn't know. And it's like no one's really explained it. But I'm going to do it anyway. And I said to him, hey boy, why don't you go have a conversation? Speak to your coach. And if your coach doesn't, speak to the manager. It's like, oh, no, Dad, you don't understand. Like, oh, you get into those conversations and then they turn on you and it's like, no, just go for it. He does it. So now he's wrestling with these things, but he's facing a couple of things. He's going and having difficult conversations. But he's contending for his position. He's contending for the thing that he's desperate for and that he's lost. And you know what? Towards the end of the season, he was moved back up to his original team, 2 spots back up, and he was made captain of the team. And they went on the Great Tour, and they won their game. And he came home with scars and battle scars, and it was like, yes. But you know what happened through that process? He grew. You realize it wasn't about the rugby. It wasn't about the fact that he was dropped from the team twice. What happened through that process is that there was something of a galvanizing that was taking place. There was a strength being put in his spine. It's like, I must go have this conversation. I must contend for these things. I must now develop some maturity here. I've got to develop some level of authority, but I've got to do it with humility. I mean, I've already got humility because I was dropped 2 positions, or 2 teams, but like the effect of it is he comes out of that experience with like, I've learned perseverance. And I've learned that there's something of an authority that I can actually exercise, but I can do it with humility. And there's something of an achievement at the end, like there's honor that goes with it. And man, I stick at that. And I'm looking at all of this and saying, what an amazing outcome. But you know what? I didn't know that it would turn out like that. Like it could have just been that he ended his season being dropped 2 teams. I didn't know that it would end like that, and I had no control over the process. But here's the difference. God does know how it ends. He knows the end from the beginning. Like he knows exactly what's going on. He knows exactly how things are going to pan out. And he's in control. He's not like separated from what's happening in this world. And so with that level of knowledge, if it was me, like if I had knowledge of how it was going to turn out and I had control over what's taking place, I would have been saying to him, go for it, Boykie. Just go. Trust your dad here. Trust me. This is going to be good for you. I was kind of like, hey, you've got to finish the season. I was like, oh, I hope it's going to turn out okay. But like if I knew and if I had control over it, I was like, it's going to be good. Trust me in this. You watch how things will turn out. That's exactly how it is with God. Because He's in total control. I don't know what you're facing. And when it comes to difficulty, man, I'm not advocating that this is an easy subject. But what I am advocating is that God has an ability to turn these things into something glorious. That Romans 8 text of Him turning all things for good. What He's talking about there is ultimate good. We have a final salvation, and we have a guaranteed destiny, and we have inheritance that's being kept for us, and we are being kept for it. And all of what happens in this life, He can turn for good. He can turn for that good. That verse is not talking about a temporal good that's going to come out of a temporal bad. It's like sometimes we just have temporal bads. But ultimate good. What will come of this? He knows exactly how things will play out. Because He knows tomorrow. And not only that, but He is in control of things. You know, it's like we must stop thinking about God as a fireman. You know, it's like, calamity, I'm in the fire. Now I must pray that God must come put out the fire. Don't think about God like that. Think of God as a surgeon. Think of Him as a perfect, gentle surgeon. And the fact that we have tumors that needs to be removed. Tumors of self-righteousness and tumors of unrighteousness. And there's a delicate process that's required. And He plans and prepares and works, and He cuts out whatever doesn't resemble Jesus. Why? Because we are being conformed into His likeness. And with that, greater reward, greater glory. You know, it's like if we could just see it from that perspective, we would know, man, as much as what I'm going through here, I don't have the answers for it. It doesn't make sense. It sucks. It's like, man, I wish I didn't have to go through it. But when we have a theology for it and we understand in the story of God what He is busy with, then we can still greatly rejoice because He's at work. And when we realize that these things are happening in our lives in such a way that He will bring it to ultimate good, we can rejoice to know that He's actually preparing us for something even greater. I think we're very quick to see the difficulties in life as the activity of the devil or enemy attack. The enemy is at work, and he is involved in our woes. But I want to say he's on a leash. He's on a leash. He doesn't have free rein. And we need to see some of the texts of Scripture, like Job, where he says the Lord has given, but the Lord's also taken away. He doesn't say, well, the Lord gave, but the devil took away. So, no, the Lord took away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. What kind of a prayer is, though He slay me, yet I will put my hope in Him. I know why people do that, because we want to give the blame for bad stuff. We want to put it on the devil, because it's too hard for us to make sense of how is God involved in this. And I want to tell you, when we're in the fire, His eyes on the clock and His hands on the thermostat. He knows what we need. And His refining process brings out the gold in us. He's preparing us for glory. Amen.